If you don't know enough words, you can't speak a language. No amount of comprehensible input or immersion will save you if you simply don't know the words. So how do you fix this? In the next few minutes, I'll show you the fastest way to memorize thousands of words and actually use them in real conversations. Let's get started. Mein Name ist Mikkel Hyperpolyglot. Ich spreche 12 Sprachen und ich habe im Innovationszentrum der Universität Deusto ein schnelles und effizientes System zum Sprachenlernen entwickelt. Ich habe Tausenden von Menschen dabei geholfen, Sprachen schnell zu lernen. And this is the truth about language learning. Vocabulary is the most important thing. You need to learn more words and you need to learn them faster. Because if you don't know enough words, you simply won't be able to understand or speak the language. You just won't be able to understand the sentences. And you won't be able to say them either. So you need to learn more words and you need to learn them faster. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. Because if you ask any supposed language expert, especially on YouTube, how to learn vocabulary, most of them will say the same thing. Just immerse yourself in the language. The power of reading. Watch more videos in the language, bro. Comprehensible input. And alright, all of that is fine, and the more you do it, the better, of course. Get exposed to the language as much as possible. But if you just do that, it's going to be very, very slow. Extremely slow. Watching videos, reading and listening are an extremely slow way to acquire new vocabulary. And you already need to know a lot of words to be able to understand what you are watching or listening to. For so-called comprehensible inputs to be actually comprehensible, you need to know at least 90% of the words that you are encountering. So if it only works if you already know most of the words, it's not a very effective way to learn new words. And if instead you want to learn new words by talking to people mostly, you will quickly learn a few basic words that you're going to use all the time, and that's great. But once you're able to have very basic conversations, you will very quickly stop improving, and you will stay stuck at a beginner level. So to avoid all of that, this is my advice. Yes, do as much listening as possible, as much reading as possible in the language that you're learning. And of course, talk to people whenever you can. The more the better. But make sure that you're learning vocabulary deliberately. If you still can't understand the language well, learning more words should be your number one priority. You really need to understand this. It's really important. You need to understand that if you don't know enough words, you will not be able to understand or speak the language. Vocabulary is king. Alright, so how do you actually learn more words and how do you learn them faster? Let me break this down into two parts. Part 1 is for speaking and part 2 is for comprehension, because they are different skills. They are related, and improving at one will help you improve the other as well somewhat, but you also need to work on both of them separately, deliberately, with specific exercises. So let's start with what most people are here for, speaking. How to increase your active vocabulary for speaking. Well, the best way to learn vocab is by using frequency lists. And learning the most common 1000 words will allow you to understand around 80% of the common vocabulary that people use in real conversations. That's already huge. 80%. So yes, definitely, start with frequency lists. Learn them as fast as you can. You can use HYPERLINGUA for this, by the way, link in the description. Learn all the common words in example sentences. And you can also memorize them using mnemonic associations. Mnemonics are the fastest and the most effective way to memorize random words. Words that you can't learn logically. Because there's no real logic behind what a word sounds like in a foreign language. Unless that language is related to the ones you already speak. So normally you have to learn a lot of words by heart. Through repetition. And with active recall. And this works, but it's difficult and slow and frustrating. And if you use mnemonic associations, you can make it much faster and even fun. A mnemonic association is a mental image with a story to make the information stick. And if you use mnemonics, you will remember the words and their meaning much better and for much longer than by simply using repetition. And you'll be able to learn a lot more words every day. This is the technique memory champions use, by the way. They memorize thousands of pieces of information fast. And of course, this works incredibly well for vocabulary. Now, here's the key. Context is everything in vocabulary learning. Never learn words in isolation. Yes, memorize them with mnemonics, but always inside example sentences. This is crucial. If you just memorize a word by itself, you won't know how to use it in a real sentence. You will probably still remember it if you use mnemonics, but you will not know how to use it in context. But if you learn it inside a sentence and you use mnemonics, you will not only remember the word, you will also learn how that word is used in real life, in real sentences, when native speakers use them. So for every word you learn, you should at least learn one example sentence. Ideally, several example sentences for each word. And if these sentences have audio, this makes it much easier to review them. You can do spaced repetition of all those words and sentences that you learn by simply listening to these sentences over and over again every day, in the background, while you do other things. Now, here's the part where some people make a big mistake. They learn the most common words, and after that, they just keep learning random words in the language. And this is very inefficient. Yes, frequency lists are great in the beginning, and the first 1,000 words, you should absolutely memorize them by heart. But after that, focus on the specific vocabulary that you need for the conversations you have, for the topics you normally talk about, and the type of content that you listen to or that you read. Because the 10,000 most common words in the language contain a lot of words that you will never use. Don't waste your time learning lots of words about random topics you're not interested in. You'll never encounter those words in context, and you will never use them in conversation. So why learn them? You should focus on learning the words that you need to talk about the things you normally talk about. Your job, your hobbies, your family, your interests, the conversation topics you normally talk about. And for this, I recommend you use language islands. This is my system. A language island is a personalized sentence list for a specific topic or situation. A collection of sentences for a topic that's important to you. For example, let's say you play football. You create a language island about football, and you learn sentences like, I play football every weekend with my friends. I've been playing since I was a kid. I'm a striker. Yesterday we won 3-1 and I scored a goal. And right now we're training twice a week. I have a match coming up Saturday. That kind of sentences. Those are sentences you will actually use, because it's a topic that you constantly talk about. So that you're learning vocabulary that's maybe low frequency, but it's actually really important to you, instead of learning random words about random topics. So take the time to prepare your language islands for everything you normally talk about. And this way you can quickly and easily learn thousands of personalized, relevant sentences. You need to use language islands. This is the fastest way to get fluent in any language and also to learn thousands of words fast. And all that vocabulary that you learn this way, it will stick because it's connected to your life. They're things you actually meant to say. They're meaningful and relevant, and those words are inside your own sentences about your own life and your own topics. So they're very easy to remember. This is the key to having and using a massive vocabulary. Frequency lists for the first 1,000 words, and then language islands for everything else. Learn what's important for you. Now let's talk about how to actually learn these sentences. Whether you're working on frequency lists or your language islands, the method is the same. First, you memorize the vocabulary using mnemonic associations. Second, you always learn words inside sentences, never just the words alone, in isolation. Always the full sentence, because context is everything. And third, you use spaced repetition and active recall. You don't just read your sentences once. You review them again and again, over time. And the easiest way to do this is by taking audio files of those sentences and listening to them throughout the day. And after 30 days of listening to them daily, there's no way you don't know those sentences. Spaced repetition is extremely effective. And if you use audio files, it's very easy to do. Almost effortless. And of course, the last thing you need to do is active recall. This is, according to neuroscience, the most effective way to learn new information. This is how all the best students study. And for language learning, it works really, really well. And it's extremely simple. You simply translate from your native language into the target language. And then you check if you translated it correctly or not. You take a sentence in English, you try to say it in Spanish or French or whatever language you're trying to learn, and then you check the answer. And then you try again. This is extremely powerful because your brain is solving a problem. And you will make a lot of mistakes doing this, but that's the point. Every mistake is a learning experience. Every time you get something wrong and then see the correct answer, you're one step closer to actually using it correctly in real conversations. This is so much more effective than just reading sentences passively. So you should combine all of these techniques. Mnemonics to memorize new words fast, example sentences for context, spaced repetition with audio, and active recall to test yourself constantly. And you do this with your language islands. And your speaking fluency will explode because you're not just learning random vocabulary, you're learning exactly what you need to say, the things you actually want to say. You're building the ability to express your thoughts, your ideas, to tell stories, everything in the new language. So basically, the more language islands you prepare and learn, the more fluent you become. You'll be able to talk about everything. And all of this is just from using language islands. This is how you develop real speaking fluency. Now let's talk about comprehension, because speaking is one thing, but what about understanding the language? Films, TV shows, YouTube videos, podcasts, all of that. What about consuming interesting content in the target language? Well, this requires a different strategy. And here's the problem most people face. They try to watch a film in the target language and they'll understand what's going on, more or less because of context and maybe subtitles. And they keep doing it, and you can do this for years and years. And you think that you will eventually be able to understand and speak the language by doing that. And it never really happens. It doesn't happen because you can't learn words you don't know by just casually hearing them. If you don't know a word, unless you hear it 100 times, you will not learn it through casual exposure. You'll just hear sounds and won't recognize the word inside the sentence. So here's what you need to do instead. Before you watch or listen to anything, get the transcript. Most content these days has a transcript available. So you get the transcript and you extract the vocabulary that you don't know. You create a vocabulary list from the specific piece of content you're going to watch. And you memorize all the unknown words it contains. You can use mnemonics for this. Look up all the words you don't know from the transcript and memorize them with mnemonics. Do this before you watch the video. This is important. Why? Because now when you watch the film or listen to the podcast, you'll actually understand a lot more of what's being said. And every time you hear one of those words you just memorized, you're actually reviewing them. That's spaced repetition happening naturally. You memorized the word and now you're hearing it used in real context by a native speaker in a natural situation. And this, of course, will reinforce the memory. So you get two things at once, the memorization and the review. Plus the content is much more comprehensible now, so much more enjoyable, and you're much more likely to actually remember all those new words and sentences. This makes a huge difference long term. Also for staying motivated, because consuming content in a foreign language should be enjoyable. But it's not enjoyable if you don't understand anything. And don't lie to yourself. It's not enjoyable either if you're watching childish, dumbed-down videos for beginners for years. Real content is what's really enjoyable. You can understand films, TV shows, podcasts, YouTube videos, you name it, from day one. You won't improve anywhere as fast by simply watching more and more videos. You need to do it deliberately. Always memorize the vocabulary first, and then, and only then, watch the content. Get the memorization and the review, and actually enjoy the process. So let me summarize everything. For the vocabulary you need for speaking fluency, start with frequency lists. This will get you about 80% comprehension in everyday conversations. Learn the most common words, but as soon as possible, switch to language islands. Create personalized sentence lists about all the topics you actually talk about. Learn what's important for you. And always learn words inside example sentences, because context is everything. Never learn words in isolation. Use mnemonics to memorize hundreds of words fast. Use spaced repetition to review over time with audio. And use active recall to test yourself constantly and to activate that vocabulary so that you can use it in conversation. If you do this, you can easily learn thousands of relevant, personalized sentences and words and become fluent in any language fast. So stop wasting time with slow and passive methods and start learning vocabulary deliberately. Start right now. Link in the description.